C1. You are listening at FameTV.info. The scorching summer sun burned the earth, under a huge banyan tree in Sea Heart Park, for ferocious tattooed men, under the command of a yellow-haired buck-toothed man, punched and kicked a thin young man, causing blood to spray out. This young man actually didn't let out a single scream, which made the situation somewhat strange, curling his body, trying his best to not expose his important points under his fists. Chui Hao's heart felt a pain as sharp as a knife. He felt as if his heart had died. "All right, brothers, stop. It's not good to beat this brat to death." He waved his hand, looking arrogant most of the time. When some of the cloths were forcefully torn apart, it would mean that they had completely broken off. With widened eyes, Zhao Hongyan almost could not believe that these were the words spoken by the warm man Chui Hao she was familiar with. Feeling that his own woman had been humiliated, Luoyang army glared at her and scolded, "What the f***ck, what a cheap bone. Brother Ho-san, teach him a lesson, teach him a lesson. I will invite my brothers to eat and drink at the Haitian hotel tonight. Damn it, you fat pig, I'll kill you." Angry and furious, Chui Hao struggled to stand up. His body was just swaying due to the violent beating. Woo-woo. Seeing that Chui Hao's eyes were red and he looked like he was about to fight to the death, Luoyang army hurriedly activated Maserati and charged out. Chui Hao was enraged, but he only swallowed a mouthful of black smoke, while in the distance, the Luoyang army's arrogant laughter could be heard. "A poor jiaoxi like you is destined to be trash your entire life. Lowly commoner. You've been expelled. Just wait and starve to death. Stop yelling. Even after beating you for so long, you still managed to stand up. Brothers, hit me." The yellow buck-toothed Ho-san shrieked, picked up a wooden stick and rushed over. It was 5 against 1, and Chui Hao was even facing 5 hoodlums who struggled with everything they had every day. Very quickly, he was knocked down again, his fists and wooden sticks rained down, and another round of fierce strikes began. 10 minutes later, Ho-san and his 4 lackeys got into a chorus and left the scene in a flash, leaving Chui Hao lying on the ground dying. Seeing the 2 blurry names on the big banyan tree not far away, Chui Hao smiled, as blood dripped from the corner of his mouth and tears rolled down heavily. This big banyan tree was the witness of his and Zhao Hongyan's love affair 3 years ago. The river flows east for 30 years, and the river flows west for 30 years. Don't look down on this young man's poverty. After he finished speaking, he suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. Unerringly, Chui Hao's bloody palm just happened to come into contact with a body that was right next to him. It spun around, and actually quickly absorbed a bit of fresh blood, emitting a faint golden light. It was a thumb-sized gray bead. At this moment, golden light was being emitted from it. It was as if a pupil had suddenly awakened. With a swoosh, the gray bead suddenly flashed and directly charged into the center of Chui Hao's brows, starting to make a miraculous change. In his stupor, Chui Hao's entire consciousness became chaotic, but he faintly felt an incomparable pain in his eyes. One moment was burning like fire, the next moment was bone-piercing like ice. After an unknown amount of time, he finally came into contact with a wave of energy in the endless darkness. So big. So white. So beautiful. In that moment, Chui Hao felt as if he had worn a night vision goggles, and what entered his eyes was a pair of soul-stirring oval objects. Its shape was extremely perfect, giving people the urge to kneel and worship it. Seeing that, Chui Hao could not help but feel his mouth go dry, his entire body boiling hot. Although he wasn't an ignorant boy, he had never seen such a beautiful scene before, not even in his dreams. This was a girl with a beautiful face. She had a fiery and enchanting body with curves, especially in that mysterious area. It was as if she was waiting for a fated person to pick her. It was simply too tempting. Wait, why was she holding a needle in her left hand and wearing a stethoscope in her ear? Looking at this scene, Chui Hao was stunned. He was stunned for a moment, and it felt as if there was some power flowing out of his eyes. Immediately, that charming beauty turned into a white-clothed nurse with a mask, needle in hand, and stethoscope hanging on his neck. With a slight frown, Wang Qian felt that the man in front of her had a weird expression in his eyes. It was clear and transparent, as if he had seen through her body. When a kind-hearted person found out that you fainted under the great banyan tree in the park, he called our hospital. He only paid 100 yuan in hospital fees. Since you're awake, quickly call your family and friends to inform them to come and pay. Oh. Cui Hao frantically promised twice, but he was still a little dazed that he was clearly in the hospital just now. But why did he see through this beautiful nurse so easily? Was this the situation with the divine steeds? As he calmly laid on the bed again, Cui Hao's heart was once again swept up by grief. Although the cruel abandonment of his girlfriend had disheartened him, he still couldn't help but feel hurt inside. Thinking about how that woman revealed her true nature, Cui Hao suddenly felt that he was a waste. It was not worth it to be sad for such a woman. As a result, he jumped in his thoughts and began to ponder over what he had just seen. After calming his mind, Cui Hao suddenly realized with shock that he had felt the changes in his body. Between his eyebrows, there was actually a gray orb floating, with circles of weak golden light coiling around it, like an eyeball. Wasn't it the only ornament he had on his body when he was young? It was neither gold nor iron, and neither was jade nor stone. All these years, Cui Hao had been bringing it around to ask about the location of his parents, but no one had been able to explain exactly what it was. Immediately, threads of golden light shot out, forming a large circle in his body, and once again, returned to a slightly stronger state. At the same time, a kind of vague feeling appeared. Cui Hao had a feeling that as long as he controlled the golden light to enter his eyes again, he would be able to activate his penetrating energy again. As for how to keep the golden light from being born, it would only be possible to make the bead emit those strange fluctuations. After he understood everything, Cui Hao's mind shifted away from the center of his brows. He tried to urge a few golden lights into his eyes, and immediately, the ceiling above his head slowly turned transparent. He hurriedly sat up and looked at the other patient lying inside the room. Not only that, something even stranger happened. Cui Hao actually saw the various structures of the boy's body, the blood flow, and when it reached his head, it was slightly stagnant, as if the focus of his body was at an acupuncture point. Suddenly, Cui Hao felt a dizzy feeling in his head. He was shocked to find that his eyes had shot out a faint golden light which quickly entered the boy's wound, causing his wound to stop bleeding and heal. The stagnant feeling in his blood flow had also disappeared. So dizzy. Cui Hao hurriedly lay down again, but his heart was not at peace. It doesn't hurt anymore. My head doesn't hurt anymore. The little boy who was lying on the bed suddenly shouted out loudly. His tone was very happy. What's going on? Hearing that beautiful nurse walked in again. Hearing that the little boy said that his wound didn't hurt anymore, she didn't believe him at all, but when she removed the gauze and saw that the wound was almost completely healed, she was also shocked. This little boy was here this morning, and his wounds were quite severe. It had only been half a day, and he had already recovered. This was unimaginable. After spending about half an hour, Cui Hao had finally confirmed the abilities his perspective had after repeated testing. Firstly, he had the ability to see slightly, and could almost see the smallest parts of materials, and secondly, the ability to see clearly with his night vision. He could clearly see everything under the pitch-black bedding. Thirdly, he could see anything he wanted, and if he didn't want to see anything, he could just look through it, and fourthly, if he wanted to stare at some injuries for a certain period of time, his eyes would emit was a light golden light that had a strong healing effect. Was excited by the 4 special effects of his penetrating eyes. He even had a hunch that his eyes still had a lot of power left to be developed. The only thing that made him unhappy was that the golden light released by the mysterious bead in his body was limited. They could not continuously use his eyes. I'm rich. After a short moment of absent-mindedness, Cui Hao became excited. With the penetrating eyes, he was no longer the ordinary Jiaoxi he was before. At this moment, his heart, which had almost lost all confidence in his life, once again stimulated his boundless hope and courage. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.